dinner date turned into a nightmare when he noticed my phone buzzing and took it. Then, I've never been in this type of messy situation before. I've just put myself in a very big problem and I'm at the verge of losing my marriage. My husband suggested we go on a date, but it ended in a bad way. My affair partner kept sending me messages while I was on a date with my husband. He got curious and snatched the phone from me. I was surprised by his actions and honestly, I didn't see it coming. My name is Daniela. I am 27 years old. The name of my husband is James. He is 29 years old. My husband and I have been together for 7 years, but currently we're in the process of getting a divorce as a result of my infidelity. I've been cheating on my husband for quite a while now, and I feel so guilty thinking about it. I never for a day imagined that things would get out of hand and I will have to go through this fate. I didn't think that my husband would be the one to find out that I was cheating on him. What even made it painful was the fact that he found out on the date he organized just for the both of us. I'm here to let you all know about this and just hope that someone who reads this would have an idea as to how I can save myself and my marriage from this. To say that I'm desperate is an understatement, guys. I urgently need advice from you all. James is a nice guy and also a good husband. I don't blame anyone for my infidelity, not even James, because I am old enough to know what's good and what's bad. But nevertheless, James somewhat had a hand in this. James barely has time for both of us. It's not like the nature of his job requires more time though, but he chose to be nonchalant about us. Sometimes I wonder if he does it on purpose. Apparently, James is a gynecologist. His work doesn't take long hours, but James always comes back home late at night. Sometimes he does hang out with his friends, but doesn't usually come home to spend time like normal couples do, or even go out together. I tried to always come back home early from work so as to have some time with my husband, but James is not always around. His nonchalant behavior towards our marriage made me stop liking him. It seemed like I was the only one that was putting effort into making our marriage work. I also didn't like the fact that he always spent more time outside than he spent at home. But thinking about it, guys, I regret my actions and I wished I never went down that path because right now I'm currently dealing with a lot of things. One of those is my affair partner. Right now, he's currently not picking my calls or replying to any of my text messages. Frankly speaking, guys, I hate him right now and everything about him. I cannot believe that he did this to me after the time we both had spent together. Does it mean that all of those times meant nothing to him or he just used me to have fun? My life and everything that I have worked for is crumbling in pieces right in front of me. I take full responsibility for my actions. James not spending time with me isn't enough reason to cheat on him. I should have spoken up but kept assuming that he was cheating on me, which he wasn't. At some point I did tell him about it, but my husband just shrugged it off like it's nothing. He made me look like I was a mad wife. So guys, I couldn't continue to deal with this nonchalant behavior that my husband had developed. I got tired and frustrated. Our first few years of being together wasn't like this. I honestly did not know what changed all of a sudden. The sudden change made me seek attention elsewhere, so I cheated on him. I got the attention I was crazily begging my husband for. I started going out with an old friend from my neighborhood when I was living with my parents. His name is Henry. Henry was a year older than me, and he was one of the most handsome guys in our neighborhood back then. Henry and I lost contact after our graduation in high school, and we got connected back a few months ago. One day, while I was heading out from the house, I saw a familiar face conversing with someone I didn't know. I drove closer and saw that it was Henry, my old-time crush and neighbor. Yes, guys, I once had a crush on him way back. I quickly parked and went down to say hello. I called out to him because I knew he was the one. Immediately, Henry turned around to see who it was. From the look on his face, Henry was surprised and shocked to see me. We both ran and hugged each other. I was so happy that I got to meet my longtime friend. Henry also expressed his excitement and we talked for a while before he proposed for us to go have a conversation elsewhere. At that moment, I postponed whatever I wanted to go and get and went to a nearby restaurant with Henry. We indeed had such a nice time together. Henry collected my number and promised to give me a call that evening. When I got home that day, Henry called like he promised, chatted for a few minutes before we hung up on each other. Of course, I had the number saved on my phone and we talked from that day onward. Henry and I started chatting for a few weeks, telling each other about how our day went. Honestly, guys, we also called and texted for late hours and sometimes Henry came visiting to keep me company. So guys, that was how Henry and I became so close that we started going on dates together secretly. Yes, guys, I told Henry that I was married but didn't know James, so we kept our relationship private. He wasn't able to attend our wedding at the time we were about to wed because we lost all forms of communication. So moving forward, this secret meeting went on for a couple of months and it felt like I was getting myself back. I forgot I was even married for a long time due to how James was treating me. Henry gave me all the attention I was begging James for. I felt happy because I never thought that someone could actually listen to me or give me the quality attention I was longing for a long time. I began to think Henry was the one for me, and gradually I forgot about James. So guys, James and I were like a total stranger in the house. We would wake up in the morning and go our separate ways to work. Before I started dating Henry, I was always telling James about his sudden change, but all went on deaf ears. Anytime I tried complaining, it made me look like I was the mad one. I didn't want to lose my sanity, and I stopped complaining. At that time, I made up my mind that I wouldn't waste my time in fixing a marriage that the other party wasn't putting an effort into. All I wanted was the attention and to be loved by my husband. James wasn't the only busy one I was. In fact, if we were to talk about who was to be more busy, then it's definitely going to be me because I worked in a producing industry that requires long hours and shifts. But I still tried my best to come back home early and render my duty as a wife. Duty, I mean cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the house. All other things weren't included. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. Even though my reasons for cheating are not enough, I know that James has a lot of faults in it. Let's say maybe he thought I was okay, but didn't know that I was feeling lonely and needed the love of my husband. That was what he failed to see and didn't care to ask if everything was all right with me. So guys, the time that James finally decided to take me out, that time it was already too late. I had cheated on him with Henry already. He didn't know that I was seeing someone else, or rather someone else was giving me the attention that I needed. But thinking about it right now, I terribly regret everything and I wish I could turn back the hands of time. I want to make things right with him again, and I just hope he finds a way to forgive me. After the incident on our date, I couldn't get hold of myself. The reality of everything dawned on me instantly. I watched my husband acting cold towards me. He forgot for a second that I was his wife. You all needed to see the look on his face. It was terrifying. I couldn't even look him in the eyes to say anything. I ran out of words and didn't know where to hide my face. Everyone at the restaurant was literally staring at us, and those that cared to listen stayed back, even though they were done eating. I never thought that the date I yearned for so many months could be the one to end my marriage. How I wished that Henry didn't call me at that moment. I wouldn't blame him because it wasn't his fault. He called at the wrong time. But the aftermath of the whole situation is what is angering me. Henry denied me like he never knew me. To think that I went to see him and explained everything after the whole scenario that happened at the restaurant, and the cold shoulder he gave is what is paining me the most. I thought maybe he would be compassionate enough to even let me in or pretend to care, but I got the opposite of my expectations. I trusted him. That was the mistake I made. I shouldn't have. And now I am reaping the consequences of what I sowed. Everything that I have worked for in my marriage is crumbling right in front of me. I know you all would be curious to know how everything came to play and what actually happened, right? Well, I will tell you all about it now. Apparently, James noticed that I wasn't nagging or complaining about his sudden change for a while, and so he decided to surprise me. It was a few days ago. I was at work when he called to tell me that he wanted to show me something. Coming from James at that time, I was very anxious to know what it was because it was unlike him. At that time, I could count the number of times he called me at work, and what even made me anxious was the fact that he had something to show me. So guys, I quickly packed my things and headed home. While I was on my way, I kept thinking about it. I eventually got home and opened the door. When I entered, I saw James seated on the couch. He must have probably been waiting for me. I apologized for taking so much time to come back home, but he got up from the couch and pecked me. He told me that he wasn't angry, and in fact, I made it on time. At that moment, my heart was beating so fast that I got goosebumps on my body. I thought maybe I was dreaming and wanted a confirmation that I wasn't. What even got me surprised was the thing James said next. Guess what, guys? James told me that he wanted us to go on a date at a nearby restaurant. That statement actually made me wonder if James was the one standing right in front of me. I was shocked and was also surprised at the same time. I was quiet for a few seconds before thinking if this was really my husband, James. I thought maybe he must have been swapped or hit his head on the wall that made him ask that. I wasn't expecting that from James, and honestly, guys, I was very surprised. I was deep in my own thoughts when my husband tapped me. I quickly recomposed myself and nodded my head in agreement. James hugged me and said we should head out immediately, but I told him that I wanted to freshen up and change into something nice before leaving. He agreed, and I went upstairs. While I was in the bathroom, I was very happy and excited that my husband had finally decided for us to go on a date. It was something I was yearning for so long and was happy that it was happening already. Just when I was about to shower, I remembered Henry. I felt a little bit of guilt and had mixed feelings. I became moody knowing what I did. I thought of how my husband would feel if he learned about my infidelity with Henry. It was as if karma came knocking at the wrong time. I stopped thinking about it and had my shower. After a few minutes, I came downstairs to meet James. He was very calm and didn't complain. James complimented my dressing and told me I looked beautiful in it. I couldn't look at him because I had a sense of guilt in me. I kept thinking about the dirty thing I did with Henry. But at that time, I decided to stop thinking about it and enjoy the moment. James held my hand and we left the house. So guys, we went to a nearby restaurant not too far from the house. It was a nice fancy place. Usually couples come there to have a lunch or dinner date there. I felt special that James brought me there. It was so thoughtful of him to have proposed a lunch date for us and also hang out together. We headed to a table and we sat down waiting for someone to come take our orders. While we were waiting, James began apologizing for neglecting me all this while. He told me that it wasn't deliberate, that he got overwhelmed with work. He poured his heart out and apologized frantically. I was amazed by what James said and was also happy that he had realized he was wrong. I was literally blushing and smiling at the same time. To say that I was happy is an understatement, guys. I was literally over the moon to say lol. A few minutes later, someone came to our table to take our order. One thing that I loved about the restaurant was the way and manner they received us. Everything was well put and the staff were well mannered. The atmosphere was pleasant. I loved everything about the restaurant. James really knows how to treat a woman well when it comes to going on a date. I looked through the menu and placed my order. James ordered the same thing with me. LOL. It took a while before our orders arrived. Before it came, James and I were sipping on the glass of wine just to pass away time. At that moment, I totally forgot about Henry. All I was thinking was how to enjoy the moment and was also thinking about what to say if James learns about it himself. I didn't want to ruin the moment, so I stopped thinking and concentrated more on James. He looked very handsome. When the orders finally arrived, we started eating. This is where it gets interesting to you all reading this. I honestly did not know that the date that I was yearning for so long would send me parking. When James and I started eating, my phone beeped twice. Honestly speaking, guys, at that time I wasn't expecting any messages or calls from anyone. All that I was thinking about was James and the date we were on. Immediately, I took my phone to see the message. Of course it was Henry. The first two messages were about my welfare. I read it and didn't text back so as to not disrespect my husband. I dropped my phone and continued eating my food. James didn't notice anything. He was focused on his food. A few seconds later, my phone was buzzing again. I ignored it and didn't reply to the message. But at this time, my husband was interested to know what was going on. James asked if everything was okay, which I said yes. But from the look on James's face, I knew he didn't buy that response, but he nodded in agreement. At that moment, I was already feeling uncomfortable. I was pissed that Henry had to text me at that odd hour. The thought of switching my phone didn't cross my mind. If not, I would have done that. The messages kept on coming, and so I took my phone to see what he had sent this time. I took my phone to take a slight glimpse of it before muting it. It was this time that James said I should reply to who the texter was, so as to not keep the person waiting. But I told him that there would be no need for that, and so we continued eating and I dropped my phone. The messages stopped for a few minutes before my phone started buzzing again. Before I could take a look at it, James quickly took it and said he would like to see it. It was then that James saw Henry's name. He was curious to know who the texter was because I didn't save Henry's number with the usual name. The name attracted his attention, and so he opened the messages. Apparently, I had saved Henry's number as Pia. When my husband opened the messages, he asked who Pia was and why she was asking if I could come over to our usual hotel and have fun because she was missing me. James was curious, and he immediately asked if at all I was gay. Immediately, I told him I wasn't. I asked him to give me back my phone, but he refused and proceeded to read the other messages. At that moment, I already knew that I was finished. Every message he read, he would shake his head and say something interesting. After reading everything, James gave me my phone back. I was scared and was waiting to see his reaction. If I knew it, James gave me a very loud slap. It was so loud that it attracted attention and at the same time was very painful. He then got up from his seat and came to where I was seated. He dragged me up from my seat and angrily asked me to tell him who is Pia, or else he would give me another slap. But this time, it would be more painful. I started stuttering and didn't know what to say. Everyone was already looking in our direction. I was very surprised and shocked to see James acting that way. In our years of marriage and relationship, I have never seen him that angry before. It was his dangerous side I didn't know about, and I was the one that awakened it. James dragged me out from inside the restaurant to outside the restaurant. Everyone was already staring at us. The passers-by also stopped to watch. James yelled at me and told me awful things. He also made it clear that I shouldn't bother coming back home because I would hate myself if I dared to. So guys, I need your advice about this. Right now I feel ashamed of myself. The embarrassment from James at the restaurant was too cold. I wish I could erase that memory from my head. Also, I regret what I did, and I hope that James will take me back. I would be in the comments section to read what you all have to say about this. I know you all would judge me, and I'm ready to be judged, but please no nasty comments. Update. Hi guys, I'm back to complete my story, but before I continue, I want to officially say that I am now a divorced woman. Yes guys, my husband and I have officially parted ways. The last time I was here, I told you all that I and my husband were in the process of getting a divorce. Well, all efforts to make things right went in vain. James had his mind made up to divorce me. Even after I went over to the house to plead with him, but he gave me a cold shoulder and didn't think twice before sending me out. I was disgraced twice. One was at the restaurant and the other was at the house. Apparently, I pleaded with my parents to go with me and talk to James, but they bluntly turned it down. Most especially my dad. He is vigorously against infidelity. When they refused, I went over to a relative of ours, my aunt. She had pity on me and she volunteered to go with me. But she told me that I shouldn't expect anything and take whatever that comes from it because no man would accept to live with a cheater. I felt ashamed hearing those words. Of course, no man in his right senses would want to be with a cheating partner. So guys, my aunt and I went over to the house to plead with James. But guess what guys, James didn't give us a listening ear. Even if he didn't want to hear anything I had to say, he should have at least heard from my aunt. I was too embarrassed that I had to cover my face. I apologized to my aunt for bringing her into the mess I created. My aunt was compassionate and didn't judge me or yell at me for disgracing her. James made us leave the house and was yelling on top of his voice. His voice was so loud that it attracted the neighbors. All the neighbors that cared to listen came over and my ex-husband didn't disappoint. He narrated everything to them. I wouldn't blame any of them because I was the one that put myself in that disgraceful position. Who wouldn't want to watch a thing like that or even want to listen or know the full story? Absolutely anyone would want to. At that moment, I knew that there was nothing left. James had already made up his mind to not let me in. I ran into the car, leaving my aunt at that side. The scene was so embarrassing that I had to leave. The side comments and the painful words pierced into my soul. I cried bitterly. My aunt came to join me and we left the place. When I got home, I didn't think twice before signing the divorce papers. I signed it and sent it back to him. The embarrassment was too much and I kind of deserved it. I guess bad things happen to bad people, and at the end of the day, I should have seen it coming. Thank you all for reading this awful experience of mine. What happened is a misfortunate incident and brought about by my greed and covetousness. I'm going to say how it cost me my name, life, and entirety. It was an event brought about by a series of previous occurrences in which I will give a detailed account of how it all came to be the best that I can to your understanding. Hi Redditors, my name is Angel and I'm 27 years of age. I'm a lady who graduated from college 4 years ago, having studied marketing for 4 years at one of the prestigious and popular colleges in the state. I'm an easygoing lady who loves to party out at nights. I love dancing, singing, and I'm a big fan of modern-day pop. Unlike most ladies, I also engage in sports and working out as I was a student athlete who played lawn tennis back in school, although I couldn't further due to financial block. I currently own a salon in a popular district in the state. I got married to my husband at the age of 24 a year after I finished college, and it has been a blessing in my life and my progress as a person. We have a child together and his name is Jay. My husband Hayden Smith was the only child born into a family of farmers, which meant he had to continue the family's legacy by being one. Alongside farming, he is a preacher at our church. I hardly attend, unlike my husband, who is more religious. He is 29-year-old and he is 2 years older than I am. He is a calm man who takes his farming business seriously since it is a family's legacy. He also hopes to pass it to our son in the future. He loves sports, especially basketball. He loves cooking and also visits the gym regularly on free days when he isn't involved in the farm or isn't engaging in the church's assignment. He graduated from the university with a top grade, finishing as the best graduate of the Department of Social and Human History. My husband and I, alongside our son, have a really beautiful and real family. My friends told me that they envied our family. It's such a blessing to be a preacher's wife. He is an honest and caring man, but he detests dishonesty and cheating. He loses trust once it is broken, especially from someone he least expected it from, which includes his family, me, his wife, and a couple of his friends. Hayden and I met not quite long after I graduated. It was at a grocery store where we first bumped into each other while I was picking up food items from the store, and he was probably getting his food items sorted out too, but he left the store earlier than I did. After I paid the cashier, I was on my way out of the store to get a cab to take me home. It was at this point a vehicle drove in front of me. It was him. He offered me a ride, and at first I refused, and then he insisted. I'm pretty sure he had no intention of backing down from his offer, so I accepted his offer for a ride. He then told me he had been waiting outside the store for me since he left. He told me he felt a connection when we met, and he would like to have my contact, and this was after he had properly introduced himself. I agreed and gave him my contact, and he did the same. After this, we went on a couple of dinner dates, road trips, and one thing led to another, and we married, in which we had a son not too long after our marriage. It is no news that I own and run a hairdressing salon, as I have stated earlier. I have a work secretary who goes by the name Jessica. She helps and assists me with administrative and other relevant duties at work, unlike other workers who are mainly hairdressing professionals. I started my salon a few months after I graduated from college, and it has been booming with customers and has been really profitable. About a year ago, something unfortunate happened at my work. It caught fire with no loss of life, but then the majority of my equipment and work properties were destroyed. The fire outbreak happened overnight during closing hours and was apparently caused by an accident. Jessica had failed to switch off one of the hair curlers on this day before closing. I had no insurance, and I had to find a way to make repairs to the damaged building. Of course, the finances for the reconstruction and repair would have to be paid by me and my husband since there was no insurance. I was introduced to a real estate and building construction agent who happens to know about these sorts of things. I mean the repair and reconstruction. The agent's name was Angela, similar to my name. The first meeting I had with her was in front of my burnt salon shop. Hayden had helped me to call her and informed her we were going to meet there. Once she arrived, I was surprised the agent was a female, as it has never been a ladies' area of expatriate to deal in affairs like this, and it was at this point, I believe. She introduced herself and told me her name. She took a look around the salon and suggested a contractor who was going to handle the reconstruction. She placed a call right in my presence, calling the contractor asking for his availability in order to suggest he meets up with us at the location. It was a disappointment since the contractor told her he wasn't available at that moment, and we fixed a meeting for the next day at 10 o'clock in the morning in which it was agreed. It was the second day I moved to the salon after our agreed meeting the previous day. I had made breakfast for my husband, who was going to drop our son at school on his way to work. I got to the meeting point at 5 minutes after 10 in the morning, where I had met Angela, who was already briefing the contractor on the matter at hand. From my viewpoint, I couldn't see his face from the parking lot, and he wasn't really facing in my direction. I moved closer, and to my shock and surprise, I saw Jacob, my ex-boyfriend who we once dated when we were both at school. The relationship ended for some reason best known to him. How could someone just wake up and say they want to break up? Because that's what he did. He just requested for space, and even though I still loved him, I had to let him go. I didn't want it forced, so we just broke, and now we were meeting ourselves again. The look he had on his face made it clear that he was shocked also, but then we decided to hide it from Angela without an agreement, since no one talked about it or made mention of it. Angela introduced us to ourselves, and we went ahead to discuss business. Jacob decided he was going to take over the project. Jacob and I agreed to meet the following week to discuss the method of work progression, and that he needed time to start preparations for work. It was the following week on a Tuesday as agreed that we met, and it was at this time Jacob suggested we take a look at another space a few streets away I might be interested in. He told me the apartment was cheaper and at the same time bigger and more favorable to my business. I was interested in the place because of the way he was talking about the building. He said it was well located, has a better chance of getting customers, and the reconstruction will cost far less than the repair of the burnt salon. We went there together with him driving. Yes, I went with him in his vehicle, especially because I believe there are topics to be cleared between us. He told me how he had been faring since school days and explained his reasons for the breakup. We discussed other topics, and it was at this point I got to know that he was still a bachelor, although he had multiple relationships since we broke up. Before leaving the salon, I had called Angela, the real estate agent, to meet us at the new location since she is my consultant. I asked for her availability and she told me she would be available. I sent her the address and she agreed that she would meet Jacob and I at the new location. I got to the new apartment with Jacob and truly it was really a bigger space. I don't know much about the other details and factors to consider before accepting the new deal and space for reconstruction. Jacob was showing me around the apartment and its features when Angela walked in on us. Jacob also showed her around the apartment with me asking the necessary questions I needed to ask, and Angela told Jacob to excuse us that me and her needed to discuss privately. He left the apartment for the time being. Angela advised me to accept the deal, saying it was better than the previous, but also suggested she will help me with beating down the payment of the whole contract. She called Jacob back into the room and then negotiated the payment with him. At first he was reluctant, but then he accepted the fee and we made it a deal. He told Angela and I that the whole construction process and restructuring will take up to 3 months to be fully prepared. After we had agreed with the terms and conditions of the deal with the paperwork sorted out, we all left the new apartment together. Not long after the salon project was started, days had passed and this was the first meeting between my husband and my ex-boyfriend. Hayden and I were on a road jogging session. It was a regular workout session which we engaged in on Saturday mornings, but on this day we crossed paths with Jacob, who was also out working out. I introduced Jacob to my husband as the contractor in charge of the salon project, and to Jacob I introduced Hayden as my husband. They greeted themselves and then they still continued with their routine. My next visit to the proposed new salon was after a month and a week on a Thursday. I prepared the morning meal because it was a routine after the whole family had breakfast together. I told my husband what my plans were for the day. I told him I was going to visit the grocery store to get some food items, and I would branch to the new salon to take a look at the progress of the reconstruction of the space. He suggested that he go with me. He told me he would also love to see the salon and its progress, so we decided to take a tour on this very Thursday. Hayden and I did all our activities planned for the day and headed to the salon where we arrived, and then we headed inside. We met Jacob, who was giving directives to his workers on what to do. He was also supervising. This was the second meeting between them. Jacob and Hayden. My husband suggested some additions that should be done to design. He only gave his opinion on what should be added, and I agreed with him. And looking at the progress of the job, Jacob has been doing a commendable job. After the check was done, we left. My second visit to the venue was alone, and this was the day Jacob made his first attempt to get me back. The next Thursday came and I visited the site yet again, because Jacob had called me giving me a notice that he had suggestions he would like to incorporate into the salon's design, and he needed my permission to execute the proposal. I arrived at the agreed time. I checked out the proposal, which was good, and I agreed, but I should have known that it was a bait to make me come over so he could have a conversation with me. It was not obvious to him, but I still had a little ounce of feelings for Jacob, but then I really do love my husband. He walked me out to the car park where my car is, and he started confessing how much he still liked me, and said to me he didn't know how to make a move at me because I was married, and then he could not hold back anymore, especially since we would be seeing each other much more frequently. He said that if he had a chance to do it again, he would not have broken up with me back then when we were at school. But I turned him down, not because I did not love him anymore, but because I am married, and then a preacher's wife. The job was completed in 3 months and a few days, not up to a week as planned, but at this period, my husband had gone out of town for a missionary assignment in which he took our son along with him. Being out of town simply meant he would not be able to attend the opening ceremony that I had planned for the launch of my salon at its new location, after the previous one got burnt. I invited my sister's circle, my friends and customers including Jacob, who attended the relaunch where there was all sorts of refreshment at the event. It was an occasion filled with drama, comedy, dance, music, and lots of fun. At the end party, there were 2 people left at the salon after every other person had gone home. We stood back to continue drinking and talking for a while, and he told me that he noticed my husband was not at my ceremony. I replied to him that he went on an assignment at work and he would be away for a while. I think I was drunk, and when I get drunk, I say things unnecessarily. I talked more to Jacob about Hayden and regarding my love life with him. I told him it had been months since I and my husband had made love to each other. It's either he was tired from farm work or he was far away on ministry duties for a long period of time, and this was taking a toll on my mental health and love life as a young lady. He then said to me, "Why not be with him?" I laughed out loud when he said that, and I said nothing else. It was silent for some while, but I wanted to change the topic. I told him that we're friends now, but I still didn't know where he stayed. He agreed and told me that was true, and then suggested we go check his place out now. Especially since I was drunk, I had no one to drive me back home and I could just spend the night at his place. This marked the beginning of a new affair between me and my ex-boyfriend. I got to his home that night and I was shocked at my sight. I asked him if he was truly the owner of such a beautiful home, and he confirmed it by saying yes. We entered and I was directed to the restroom where I took my bath because I was feeling hot. He offered me water after this, but I rejected requesting for more alcohol and he gave it to me. Soon after, I started rubbing my hand on his lap. He was sitting beside me. I was with him in the living room at this point. I then leaned towards him to kiss him and he returned the kiss. I don't know what came over me, but it happened. Our first intercourse after a long period of time, and I won't deny that I enjoyed it. The next morning, we woke up and we talked about what had happened. It had been a long time since I'd felt this good and I wanted it more. I guess Jacob felt it too. We both agreed that it was the start of an affair, and he confirmed while giving me a guarantee it will be our secret. After I had left the bed, I freshened up and returned home that morning to prepare for my husband and son's return from their journey. After the first day of the affair, we met occasionally for lovemaking, especially on the days of my husband's absence from town. Sometimes he would visit me at work, and the affair went on for weeks without my husband suspecting or being suspicious of such an affair until a day came. The saying that every day is for the thief, and a day, just a day, was for the owner, was a true thing. On this unfortunate and unlucky day in which I thought I had carefully planned and sorted out, my husband was to go and deliver some farm harvest to a neighboring town with my expectations that he would take a long time and wouldn't come home early from work. I faked an illness and I told him I would not be going to work on that day. I had already planned for Jacob's visit at my place. My husband agreed and suggested I needed to rest, and on this day, he took our kid to school and headed to the farm with me, hoping he would execute his plan and come late on this day. He had also agreed with me that since he would be coming late in the evening, probably around 7 o'clock because that was his usual time of arrival any time he had to deliver such harvest to a neighboring town. He suggested that I pick our son up in the afternoon around 2 o'clock from school. I agreed with him and that was sorted out. On this day, Hayden took Jay at 8 o'clock in the morning. When it was 9 in the morning, an hour after they had left, I called Jacob to come over, telling him I was alone at home and I will be hosting him at home. He arrived 30 minutes after calling, and by then I had already started preparing meals I wouldn't have cooked on a normal day, not even for my husband. When he arrived, I served him after I was done cooking. We talked more, and this was around 11 o'clock in the morning. We headed into the room for our usual room activity. We had begun, and at this point I was on top of him, and I couldn't not scream, if you understand. It was then that the door opened on us and someone walked in with a chainsaw. It was Hayden, who charged at us with annoyance, and as soon as I saw him, I jumped off Jacob, who also turned off the bed to evade his slash. Hayden told me that he had canceled the delivery of the harvested produce and returned home not long after dropping our son at school. His intention was to stay at home with his ill wife and had moved the delivery to another day. He said when he got back home, he had brought the chainsaw, a lumbering tool, to the farm in which he wanted to drop it. He needed it for use at home to cut some trees. He opened the door to the living room downstairs and was hearing weird and loud noises, which he rushed up with the chainsaw in his hand. He couldn't believe his eyes, and he was shocked when he saw Jacob and I on his bed, and he couldn't contain his anger, so he just decided to let it all out with bloodlust and rushed towards us to take revenge. Immediately, I stood up from Jacob. He ran out of the house without his shirt on, and Hayden chased after him. This was my chance, and I wore my clothes as fast as possible so as to be able to escape for the time being till my husband's head is cool off, because I'd never seen him this angry. Hayden was unable to catch Jacob, so he returned for me, although I was already outside the house when he came back. He went inside knowing that it was futile to start chasing me around the way he just did with Jacob. He went up into our room and started tossing off my luggage, and I'm scared and worried. Update. After a lot of pleading that day, Hayden turned a deaf ear and insisted I was done in his home. I picked up my luggage and headed for a friend's house. He took possession of our son and also cut the credit card payment for the reconstruction of the salon, which was to be paid in installment. The rental fee of the apartment used for the salon was on his card and bills, but he cut off everything, and through this action, I lost the salon. I should have expected this, and I brought this unto myself. I didn't think of the consequences that would happen. I visited Jacob after the incident. That bull. Jacob broke off with me and told me he had no intention of actually dating me or accepting me into his home, and he said it was just like the old days in which everything was for fun. I felt so silly at what he said. He played me and I fell foolishly. A few weeks after, I was presented with the child possession papers for our son, which stated that I could only visit him twice a month, and alongside was a divorce paper to annul the marriage between I and Hayden. We have divorced and I have been single with no job, no work, and a ruined life. I tried chewing my cake and having it back. Things would have been better only if Jessica had switched off the curl. It would have been better if I had not met Jacob once again. Things would have been better if I had kept my distance from Jacob when he made his advancement towards me, and I had kept our relationship at business strictly. If only he never attended my opening party, and I didn't visit his home. Maybe it would have been better if my husband had also tried as much as possible to make time for me, other than the fact that most of his focus was work-based. Above all my situation would have been better if I had stuck to my husband and not allowed greed take over my love interest. This is the story of how I lost my work, my name, and marriage. The story of how I let greed and covetousness take over and ruin my life. It was all my fault, and I take the blame for this incident. I hope the young ladies out there learn from my story not to make mistakes such as mine, and they should be able to control and reject all sinful advancement that will ruin the things they cherish. I hope at the end I will be able to regain myself and rebuild my status before it gets too late.